Welcome to part 2 of the series, where we will explore how religion functions in the survival of civilization and how Islam, by failing these core tests, reveals itself not as a force for long-term flourishing, but as a relic of tribal domination. Religion, in its best form, acts as an evolutionary stabilizer, a social glue. It promotes long-term planning, curbs violent instincts, regulates sexual behavior, and enforces moral codes, even on people who don't have any intrinsic reason to care. But not all religions are created equal. Some emerged not to build stable societies, but to expand empires. Some don't emphasize personal moral development, but enforce conformity through law and violence. And some, like Islam, may have worked brilliantly as tools for conquest, but collapse into dysfunction once the dust of war settles and become relic of tribal domination. Not all survival strategies are built to last. In evolutionary terms, Islam was wildly successful in its early centuries. It exploded out of Arabia through war, tribute, and tribal loyalty, absorbing vast territories in record time. It spread fast, demanded total conformity, and rewarded aggression and expansion. In a brutal and chaotic world, this made it a formidable survival engine. But there's a catch. Strategies that maximize short-term gains through conquest often self-destruct in the long run. Empires built on force rot from within when the momentum slows. Once expansion ends, the internal contradictions surface: economic stagnation, intellectual suppression, social decay. A critical factor in this decline was the systematic suppression of intellectuals and free thought. While the Islamic Golden Age is often celebrated by academia, it was punctuated by episodes where scholars and thinkers were persecuted. Ibn al-Khatib, a polymath and vizier in Granada, was executed in 1374 for alleged heresy. His body was burned posthumously, reflecting the intolerance towards philosophical inquiry that deviated from orthodox views. Yahya al-Shurawardi, a prominent Sufi philosopher, was executed in 1191 under the orders of Saladin for his philosophical teachings, which were deemed heretical. In Persia, during the Umayyad conquest, reports indicate that Arab armies killed those who could read and write the Khwarezmian language, leading to the loss of significant cultural and intellectual heritage. The execution of Nadir ibn al-Harith, an Arab physician and critic of Muhammad, exemplifies the early suppression of dissenting voices. He was executed after the Battle of Badr for his opposition to Islamic teachings. These actions contributed to a culture where intellectual conformity was enforced and deviation was met with severe punishment. Compare this with Judaism and Christianity, which evolved to prioritize community structure, moral reflection, education, and nonviolent resilience. Their growth wasn't explosive but sustainable. Their success wasn't built on war, but on adaptation and cultural transmission. Islam, by contrast, struggles to reform because its theology sacralizes dominance. Unlike Christianity, which separates church from state, accepts reinterpretation, and accepts being out of power, Islam never left the battlefield. It binds faith, law, and governance into a single, inflexible block. That rigidity slows innovation, encourages authoritarianism, and eventually leads to civilizational stagnation. We can see this in the modern Islamic world: economic underdevelopment despite resource wealth, high rates of cousin marriage and resultant genetic issues, education systems that often prioritize memorization over inquiry, authoritarian regimes justified by religious law, low innovation output compared to global standards. Islam's early success created a structural trap. It cannot easily evolve without negating its founding logic. And that logic, conquest, obedience, and tribal supremacy, is a poor fit for modern, pluralistic societies. In the end, religions that stabilize and restrain flourish. Religions that conquer and consume eventually collapse. Religion, at its best, acts like scaffolding for civilization, guiding instinct with structure, moralizing impulse, and suppressing behaviors that would otherwise destroy long-term group survival. It teaches restraint to the aggressive, loyalty to the wayward, and imposes consequences on those who feel none internally. Traditions that enforced monogamy, honored the family unit, and built moral codes into law and story helped humanity survive and flourish. Even atheists benefit from those systems' downstream effects. But Islam, as both doctrine and historical practice, fails at nearly every turn of that evolutionary test. Rather than evolving as a stabilizing tradition, it thrived as a military and cultural battering ram, expanding rapidly, then stagnating under its own inflexible rules. The early Islamic caliphates did not absorb or elevate the intellectual elites of conquered lands. They often executed them. The case of Nadir ibn al-Harith, beheaded for reciting superior Persian fables, is an omen of what was to come, rigid censorship disguised as revelation. Centuries later, in the romanticized Golden Age of Andalusia, we're told Islam fostered a haven of learning and tolerance. But even that story, upon inspection, collapses. Critical scholarship, such as that of Dario Fernandez Morera, shows that non-Muslims lived under heavy oppression, and that intellectual freedom was always contingent on deference to Islamic dogma. Islam proved itself as a tool of conquest, not a blueprint for civilizational longevity. Could take but not build. Its structure prioritizes obedience over curiosity, submission over conscience, and expansion over sustainability. As Jonathan Haidt's moral foundations theory explains, successful moral systems balance 5, later 6, intuitive pillars: care, fairness, loyalty, authority, sanctity, and liberty. Western religions, especially in their evolved post-Enlightenment forms, strike some equilibrium between them, making room for dissent, reform, and innovation. Islam, by contrast, overweights authority and sanctity to the exclusion of liberty and fairness. It does not tolerate internal contradiction, nor can it accommodate pluralism without dissolving its core. It remains, in its unreformed state, a Bronze Age operating system running on modern hardware, and inevitably crashing civilization whenever it regains administrator access.